I'm Mrs. Miller, your teacher at ELA Academy. Welcome to part 2 of my annotation demo for To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, make sure you do that before you begin. In part 1, we covered personal experience, historical context, asking questions, and personal reactions. Next up is literary devices. The most commonly noted literary devices are similes, metaphors, and personification, but don't be afraid to branch out into other things. What we'll look at today is imagery, the use of sensory detail, and how it helps to create a mood. Let's look at the description of Boo Radley's house. While I read, I want you to think about how this description makes you feel and what it seems to imply about the inhabitants. The Radley place jutted into a sharp curve beyond our house. Walking south, one faced its porch. The sidewalk turned and ran beside the lot. The house was low, was once white with a deep front porch and green shutters, but had long ago darkened to the color of the slate-gray yard around it. Rain-rotted shingles drooped over the eaves of the veranda. Oak trees kept the sun away. The remains of a picket drunkenly guarded the front yard, a swept yard that was never swept, where Johnson grass and rabbit tobacco grew in abundance. Let's talk about the vivid picture the author has painted and what kind of mood it creates. The overall mood is dark and foreboding. The words jutted and sharp sound kind of like a knife. The words south and low imply down like hell. And everything else emphasizes how badly the house is falling apart. It desperately needs paint, the shingles are rotting, the fence is falling over, and the yard is full of weeds. It looks neglected and kind of has the air of a haunted house, which fits the profile of Boo Radley in most people's minds. What does this description suggest to us about the people who live there? We have to wonder if the Radleys just don't care about taking care of their house. And if they don't care, what made them that way? Do they just have no pride or self-respect? Or did something happen to make them hide away? Was the house like this before all the problems with Boo? Maybe they're just poor and can't afford to make repairs. That could certainly be the case since it's during the Great Depression. Whatever the case may be, it certainly does not improve their reputation in town. Now let's look at characterization. The first day that Jem and Scout meet Dill, they find out that he doesn't have a father. When Scout questions him about it persistently, this happens. Dill blushed and Jem told me to hush, a sure sign that Dill had been studied and found acceptable. So first, what does this tell us about Jem? Jem seems pretty perceptive for a 9-year-old. Even though Dill doesn't say that he doesn't have a father around and doesn't say he's embarrassed, Jem figures it out from his body language. He also shows compassion by stopping Scout from pressing the issue. What does this say about Scout? She's kind of blunt and tactless. I'm just a little curious about this difference between brother and sister. Is her tactlessness due to her age or her personality, or both? I can also speculate that the way she seems kind of clueless about how her bluntness affects other people might get her into trouble. Going on to connections between parts of the text. We have 2 quotes about a page and a half apart. The doors of the Radley house were closed on weekdays as well as Sundays, and Mr. Radley's boy was not seen again for 15 years. This is one we analyzed in part 1. Now quote number 2. "There goes the meanest man ever God blew breath into," murmured Calpurnia, and she spat meditatively into the yard. She's talking about Boo Radley's father. So here's the annotation I might write for the second quote. This supports the idea that Boo's father might be too hard on him, locking him up at home for 15 years. Even though people were scared of Boo and thought he was dangerously crazy, we know that at least Calpurnia thinks his father is punishing him too severely. You should know by now that I won't leave it there. I have a question. I wonder what long-term effects this punishment has on Boo. Is he being nice and obedient, staying home like Dad wants? I'm thinking about that scissors stabbing incident and not really buying that theory. How is he coping with this? We'll want to watch for more evidence as we read the novel. Almost done. Author's use of language. Remember in Annotation 101 that I said this type of annotation can be pretty complex, but don't worry. In most cases, you won't be expected to get too sophisticated with this one, unless you're in AP Lang or some other advanced class. Usually you'll look at simple diction issues, connotation, maybe some alliteration, or simple syntax issues, mainly looking for unusually short or long sentences. Today we'll look at syntax. That was the summer Dill came to us. Not only is this sentence really short, but if you notice, it's a paragraph all by itself. That's kind of unusual, at least with this author. So let's analyze. Since this is a one-sentence paragraph, it looks like the author wants to emphasize this information. And that's the first comment you'll make with a lot of diction and syntax issues. But don't stop there. Why is the summer Dill came to them important? And again, don't just stop with the question. Try to answer it. Remember on page 1, we got a bit of foreshadowing when we found out that Jem broke his elbow badly as a kid, and years later he and his sister tried to pin down exactly what started the whole thing. Scout thinks the Yules started it all, but Jem thinks it began the summer Dill came to us, when Dill first gave us the idea of making Boo Radley come out. And then here we have this short sentence in a paragraph all by itself, Dill came to us. If we're thinking about the plot map, you know, the one with rising action, climax, falling action, and so on, then we might mark this as the inciting moment, the event that sets everything else in the story in motion. We would also want to pay close attention to Dill and his ideas about making Boo Radley come out. We know it will lead somehow to Jem's elbow being broken, which seems to be a significant event in the characters' lives. And speaking of plot, that's our last annotation type for today. You made it this far, so stick with me. Remember how Dill wants Boo Radley to come out? Well, here's his first plan. He'll probably come out after you when he sees you in the yard. Then Scout and me'll jump on him and hold him down so we can tell him we ain't gonna hurt him. This is part of the rising action, conflicts that lead to the main crisis or climax. Dill plans to instigate a conflict with Boo, supposedly to give him some company, but also just to satisfy his avid curiosity. Well, how in the world could this go wrong, right? How could Dill know how Boo will react to any of this? I'm not sure that someone jumping on me and holding me down would persuade me that they don't plan to hurt me. Their plan is not very realistic, but of course they are little kids. But given the stories about Boo, I'm not sure this plan is exactly safe. I hope that hearing the thought process behind these annotations has helped you to understand how you can annotate more rigorously and deepen your understanding of the text. Watch for more annotation demos to come. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. And check out my blog at elaacademy.us for supplementary materials on each video. This is ELA Academy.